Welcome to the first webcast of the taxonomy unit entitled Characteristics of Life. After this, you should be able to list and describe the 7 characteristics of life. Again, feel free to pause when needed in order to take your notes. So, what is living? Here are 7 items on the screen, and you quickly can press pause if you want and decide what's living and what's not. Number 1, we have some air, so that's non-living. Yeast, used to make bread rise and for other baking products, is living. This fruiting body of a fungus is also living. Water is non-living. There's a lot of living things within the water, but the actual chemical composition of water is not living. Fish is living, the rose, and the grass. Those are all living things. So what makes those things living, or makes us think other things are not living? Number 1, all living things are made of cells. There's a couple of examples down on the bottom. But cells are the smallest living unit that can carry out life processes. So that's important to know. If we were to take you, break you down to our smallest single unit, it's going to be a cell. A couple different types of cells, and if we look at different organisms, there are unicellular organisms and there's also multi-cellular. Unicellular, which means one cell or single-celled organisms, make up most of the organisms on Earth. We think that can't be true, but most of them are microscopic. Bacteria, for example, are going to be unicellular, and they're everywhere. Even though they are one cell, they can survive and live on their own. Multicellular organisms like you and me and birds and trees and animals outside and insects and everything, they have different types of cells which will perform specific functions. So here's some smooth muscle cells, nerve cells. We look at the cells of a leaf. You can see those chambers there. Plant cells are a little different than animal cells because they have cell walls. There's some red blood cells, some yeast cells. So 1, all things are made of cells. Number 2, all things use energy. So how do we get our energy? Besides the energy drinks that you have, we have to eat. We have to get sugars, and we have to get proteins and lipids and get some of the main macromolecules we need in order to survive. But the ultimate source of energy is the sun. So the sun makes us light and also gives us some heat, and it's used by plants. What's the name of that process that plants use to convert energy from the sun into food? You all know this. Of course, it's photosynthesis. So we're going to refer to plants as producers. They're going to produce the energy needed within that particular ecosystem through the process of photosynthesis. On the other hand, those things that eat, the animals, are consumers. We're consuming, well, herbivores specifically, they're only going to consume plant material, but consumers in general can eat some of the stored energy through the food chain. We'll discuss more about food chains later. There's a little food web there. Number 3, all living things respond to stimulus or stimuli. This is both internal and external. So living things respond to immediate and long-term changes in the environment. A couple examples there: shiver when you're cold, change fur color. Some rabbits specifically do this, even deer. They might have a darker coat in the summertime, a little lighter coat in the winter. And plants can actually change a little bit and move, bend, not move, towards light if needed. Okay, a couple other things here. Dogs pant when they're hot. They're not able to sweat, so as they're panting, they're able to release some of that heat. Your pupils dilate when there's lower light, so the pupils get bigger so they can collect more light, and then when it's really bright out, they're going to get smaller because they don't need as much light to see. Humans sweat to regulate when their body's hot, and then reflexes. When we touch a hot stove, we're going to quickly pull our hand away because we're off balance. And that balance I'd like to refer to as, go back one here, that balance in science terms is called homeostasis. Okay? Homeostasis is the balance. We're trying to maintain homeostasis by responding. Okay, another thing here, all living things need to be able to reproduce. Reproduction occurs for species to survive, so they need to spread their genetic material to the next generation. And this could be done sexually or asexually. Now sexually is what we typically think of as our example right down here at the bottom, where we have male and female. The egg is going to be fertilized to create new embryo, which turns into an organism. And asexual reproduction is only going to require one organism for the most part, where they're actually able to create a new organism without male and female. There's a couple different types here. Budding, so as you can see over in this picture, actually kind of just a new organism grows off and eventually it'll just break off, and there you go. It'd be pretty wild if we could do that. Fragmentation is if you were to cut a piece of this starfish off, it's going to grow into a new starfish. Many plants can do this as well. Of course, we aren't able to do this. You can't cut my arm off and there won't be another Mr. Watts here. And then binary fission can also help with unicellular organisms where two of the parts meet, but they don't necessarily have sexual reproduction. So a little bit different process. All living things grow and develop. It means they grow bigger, and they get bigger, more cells must be added, or unicellular organisms, they can simply grow as much as they are allowed to grow. There has to be a surface area to volume ratio so they can regulate waste in and out. So cell division will occur. You guys may have heard of mitosis in the past. And develop means that there's a change into an adult form. So we will often see that, especially if we look at insects, which we're going to look at. There are different types of metamorphosis going from an egg to some middle stage to an adult. And we'll discuss that later. So grow and develop. All living things change to fit their environment, or they evolve. Organisms must adapt to change or risk becoming extinct. So over time, long period of time, adaptations will occur. Now organisms don't think, I need to change to fit in this environment. The natural process will, a lot of times through mutations of DNA, will result in organisms that are better adapted for a particular environment, and they are able to reproduce, resulting in a population of organisms that are adapted for that particular environment. Okay, there's a variety of species we can see, all living, and they're adapted for their particular environments. And our last thing here is all living things have DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA provides structure for making molecules called proteins, and proteins are important for building cells. So DNA, we've all seen the example of this in the past, where we have the A, T, C, G, and so on and so forth of our DNA double helix. And all this is right here are codes for amino acids and eventually proteins. So that's important. All living things from the unicellular to the multicellular have the genetic code. They have DNA. And that DNA is going to be passed from parent to offspring during reproduction. So let's take a look here. What is happening on each of these slides? You can decide out of these 7 characteristics that were discussed, what is possibly happening, which is represented by, which picture represents which characteristic. When here we have reproduction, or binary fission. Here we have cells. Remember, particular types of cells actually group together to make tissues. Adaptations. This is response. Looks like the dogs wait patiently, and energy flow, and growth and development.